All right, ladies and gentlemen, how you guys doing out there? Hello. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we're joined by Evan Auyang. He's the president of Animoca brand. I'm sure you have heard of his name multiple times, but not so much for myself. So let me give you a quick intro myself. So my name's Josh. I'm with ShardLab. ShardLab is the innovation arm of Hashed, the VC fund, in partnership with SCBX Group, which is the one of the largest financial holdings company out of Thailand. We are trying to build applications that have benefits, tangible benefits to the end users, abstracting away the blockchain elements. So yeah, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Evan. Please, I understand you have a very illustrious career spanning from consulting, trading, and also you have experience running a bus company, right? So you're just wondering, if you could give us a quick introduction of your career and then what got you into crypto in the first place.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Happy to be here. Yes, I did have a traditional career at the time. I guess I was born in the age where people get into finance and consulting, and therefore thereafter, then have a trajectory in their careers. So I started in finance. I started on the trading floor, which interestingly has actually lots of implications of how Animoca is being built right now as well, because we do have to manage a lot of digital assets. First at sort of Bankers Trust and at Citi, and where I did derivatives actually. So that's sort of we're getting into that as well in DeFi, and then I joined McKinsey after I got my MBA, and I ran a public bus company for profit. Which actually is very similar to what we're doing right now at Animoca philosophically, because we believe ultimately what we are doing in building an ecosystem of 400 investment companies that we have, including a lot of portfolio companies, is that we're trying to build an ecosystem, right, that would propel us from Web 2 to Web 3. And so after running a bus company, went to an expert network firm, and then I joined Animoca 3 years ago. Yan and I belong to this organization called YPO, so Young Presidents Organization. He has always been an entrepreneur. I've always been a corporate leader. And as we look to scale the company and build itself with more capabilities, we thought that would be a good match. So thereafter, I think we are able to attract talent and build various capabilities within Animoca.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for the quick intro. I think, yeah, very impressive career. But then, you mentioned how, it's running a bus company is similar to building blockchain project, right? And Animoca. And could you elaborate a bit on that? I think it's a very interesting point.
Yeah. So in 2020, starting in 2020, I think we started deploying checks. By the way, Animoca was actually founded officially in 2014, really as a mobile company. So Yat is a co-founder, but the founder has left already. At that time, it was actually a mobile gaming company. So Animoca is very good with getting itself to have high App Store ranking. And then it got deplatformed a little bit because it sort of gamed the system really well. And that's when Yat came in and said in 2018 and said that, okay, let's change the company's direction into blockchain-based gaming after collaborating with Dapper Labs, distributing CryptoKitties, and then sort of get directly involved in that, right? So the company then went through different phases in terms of getting into writing small investment checks. Then we're able to raise a lot of capital, right? As some people here in the audience would know. We then went across the ecosystem to see how we can develop the ecosystem in that way. So because we have we have gaming DNA. What we did was that we not only went to help Web 2 companies going into Web 3, like what we did with the Sandbox. We also invested into founders who has that aspiration of managing digital assets, right? And believing in digital asset ownership. So in that sense, what we're trying to do is that we try to democratize gaming in terms of you putting time into games, you should then therefore own the assets that comes out of it, right? We believe that as ultimately gaming application would be the way blockchain will be adopted from current state into future state. Of course, what then transpired, we can go into that later, wasn't really the case, right? Because Web2 gaming or Web2 gamers are actually not as open to it than we originally thought, right? So we then go a lot more into the native application, native sort of built from Web3 rather than sort of Web2 to 3 kind of a approach.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks for the explanation. And I think this is a perfect segue into our main topic, which is how is the current bull market different or similar from the last bull market, right? And then let's start with the gaming that Evan just mentioned, right? During the last bull market, I think we all remember the rise of Axie Infinity. I think especially the crowd over here who live in Southeast Asia, the Vietnam was going crazy, and then everyone, like Indonesia, in the Philippines, everyone's talking about Axie Infinity and how its token price is going up, and then have millions of DAUs. But then at one point, it started going down, right? With the token prices collapsing, and then there was also another rise of metaverse, and also that in turn attracted lots of funding from different venture capital firms. And fast forward like 2 to 3 years, right? Like I don't see much of a difference, right, in terms of a gaming scene here. But it's just about my personal view. But just wondering, like, how the last bull market, in gaming, kind of resulted in what we see right now in the current bull market.
Yeah, so the last bull market was driven by NFTs and NFT craze. It was the first time been discovered. In fact, that's funny enough is that NFT itself. The term itself is just so difficult to understand. A non-fungible token. None of these words are actually understandable by the public, right? But it became a household term because of the way that digital assets has risen so quickly. What then happens is that there's a lot of investment and also speculation into the space where really that bull market is driven more by the valuations of, let's say, PFPs, right? So, obviously these projects still exist today, but they are, some are sort of like still doing really well. Some are sort of like dropping into the background, right? But the strong communities continue, despite the floor price, they're still very strong communities. You can still see those, right? Now, the what have actually transpired between sort of like that time and now, if you look at it. So if you look at the Philippines, for instance, right? Axie Infinity was really there's a whole nucleus of players playing in the Philippines for Axie. Now it's pixels, right? So you can see that is still going. That farming mechanism is still going on, except that is now no longer looking about farming for NFTs and the values of NFTs, right? So what was actually transpired at that time was that there was just a lot of projects and companies trying to make a quick buck in a lot of ways to capture that flow, that financial flow that's going into the space, right? So there's so many of these 10K PFP projects that come in that essentially fragment the liquidity, if you will, right? In terms of what the space would do or could do. And there's some rug pulls as well, as we all know, right? And then companies also went pretty deeply into the space as well, right? So you got a lot of branded companies. We talked to a lot of them that said that digital collectibles actually makes a lot of sense. How do we engage customers, right? Now, many of this trend is still actually happening today, right? In terms of companies still exploring that, but they're no longer looking at it as kind of like, oh, let's do the 10K PFPs and then we engage customers that way. Now at the time, obviously there's also this craze going on with the brands entering the quote unquote the metaverse, right? So you can see that like the sandbox at the time sold a lot of land as well where the brands actually go in because they feel that as digital natives who are coming to the space, they need a presence into the metaverse or the future metaverse, which is ownable, in order for them to represent themselves well, right? So that is the trend that happened. Now, in today, it's a little bit different, right? Today, we don't talk about NFTs quite as much, right? And the term itself has become, in the Western markets, has become something that is a little bit sort of they're avoiding it. And here in Asia, we're okay with it because it's kind of like, digital asset ownership, where you call NFT or digital collectibles, doesn't really matter. Because at the end of the day, we know as practitioners in the space, we know that what we're ultimately looking for is true digital asset ownership at the end of the day, right? Now, the current mechanics that we have today the successful cases are not only the founders that would build good games with good engagement that amass ultimately a large user community. Remember 2 years ago, there was no sizable communities at the time, right? Except for a few games, because there just aren't enough projects. Not a lot, because there are some gaming projects obviously who didn't really survive, and there's some that has been building for the last couple of years, and those are coming out to the market right now, right? Including some of our portfolio companies, right? And what you're seeing now is that what they're successful is when they capture engagement by having a good project, they also have another thing that's very critical, which is what we would call the meta game, right? So the meta game actually exists in Web 2 as well. It's really the stuff about the daily check-ins and, sort of like, go in there and do your quests, right? It's that kind of mechanism, right? Now, in Web 3, it's the farming mechanism. Now, the very important part about why Web 3 gaming is different is really from the funding model. You are essentially funding your projects via the community, right? And they give you that funding for you to build the game, right? So that you can build an ecosystem that's credible thereafter, right? Now, you also talked about AAA games and all that kind of stuff. You can actually see the spectrum of games right now. There is a spectrum, right? There are AAA games coming out, right? Of course, those names that have been in the past, they're still building mode, but you do see, Shrapnel. You see, actually there are lots of, FPS coming out as well, right? And you see games that are more simple like Pixels, right? So there is definitely a spectrum at this point in time. But the key point is that not only do they have to have a good game to attract users, they also have to have a farming mechanism or some sort of a mechanism that captures attention in the metagame for them to amass those users, right? And that's sort of what the difference is right now. It's not NFT focused. It's really about NFT is something that they would actually amass over time, but it's really the mechanism is really wrapped around more token ecosystems at this time, right?
Right. That's a very interesting point, like where this time around, how it's important to have not only just a good game quality, but also the farming mechanism, metagame you mentioned, that in turns creates a really strong of a community that could sustain the game, the project, to a longer horizon. And any particular, so you mentioned how there's a spectrum, but any particular genre or any kind of like sector, if you may, that you see stronger, I guess, a case coming out of, having these kind of traits?
Yeah, interestingly, because right now we're still riding a bull market. So any game that actually has a strong meta game is actually capturing that attention, and the spectrum is actually very broad. But over time, you would believe that you still need to go back to the basics, which is the UGC aspect of it, right? So that's our thesis and the basis why we believe that Sandbox has a lot of potential, continue to have potential, because it is essentially about creation of assets that you ultimately own, right? Now, the whole Web3 premise is really based on this philosophy that your data really matters, right? Now, if you sort of compare sort of Web 2 to Web 3 in the creators economy, the distribution channel in Web 2 really captures a lot of the pie, right? And the economic value add, and there is economic value add of your data, right? You don't own your data, but there's still economic value add. It's coming through advertising and attention and shaping an audience so brands can sell you stuff, right? I'm just putting it very crudely, right? But in a lot of ways, that dynamic, that mechanic is extremely inefficient, right? It's sort of like, yes, traditional advertising, print advertising, TV advertising has been completely replaced because of this, right? Because of the rise of Web 2 and social media. Now you're sort of like, it's all through Facebook, Google, those digital means, because you can be targeted, right? But targeting is just a better version of a very mass communication that is trying to capture attention. Now, in Web 3, what is going to matter is your identity, right? Which will be anonymous, decentralized, and really managed by you. Because that's sort of the vision that we have, is that you'll see, now as we onboard gamers, we're, using account abstraction wallets. We are building, decentralized IDs, soulbound tokens. All of these concepts wrap up to this one thing, is that there's an efficiency in actually going direct to consumer. Where's the consumer surplus coming from? It's the inefficiency from doing this mass market advertising to capture attention to, in a way, to shape your views, even political views or product views, into you accruing your reputation through your interactions, not only in gaming. We believe gaming is one way. If I'm like a whale, I should be worth more than the next guy who is only just doing free to play, right? So that reputation will matter. If I'm a DAO member, particular DAO, so if my reputation goes into other things like, like music, like I create music, right? Or I sort of like, I do certain activities in other protocols, and I have the identity, by the way, that identity doesn't actually tie in with, let's say, Evan Auyang, my government ID. It's just this wallet that I represent. It's just in the Facebook avatar world, it's just this thing, this code I'm representing myself, right? As you can see, many KOLs today are anonymous for that reason, right? That's my identity. Now that's going to be worth it in terms of like, us creating it. And in the future, that we believe in, you can either tie your identity directly to your physical identity, or you can leave it as your digital identity. In any case, you are deciding, right, over multiple identities, how you tie it together, and brands can go direct to you, right? That's the way we look at it. Now, in stepping back to what we talked about in gaming, we believe that, what we're doing with Mochaverse, right, is really what we're trying to do, is to tie that identity together with the 400 portfolio companies that we have. Within the 400 portfolio companies, we have a third of them that are actually gaming companies. And of course, our reach is much more than that, much wider than that. With 1 million Mocha IDs minted already, that is the identity that gamers will go in and log on, that will go into gaming, but beyond gaming, right? So when you onboard, when a game wants to onboard certain users, you have 1 million Mocha IDs so we can actually go into, and you can see the data that's there without it affecting your privacy, right? So like that's sort of the future as we see as a core use case, and that will come and hit gamers and sort of hit the general Web3 users, and maybe onboard the Web2 users over time.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks for sharing the importance of decentralized identity to replace the what we call the attention economy, right? And then have a more effective D2C strategies. So I think an important aspect of Web3 identity is, how much money you earn, right? So let's talk about trading, right? So financial aspect of Web3, how it was, during the last bull run, how this time is different. So last bull run, we saw, the rise of DEXs. Of course, there's a large liquidity, so the market volume went up. So CXs were made lots of money, and then that begot the rise of FTXs, and then the epic fall of it. Eventual epic fall, and then that everyone was talking about how the centralized exchanges cannot be trusted, and then the DEXs will replace the gap. But then I don't think that actually materialized. So yeah, fast forward 3 years from now, 2 years from the last bull run, like what was happening back then, and what are some of the lessons that we learned that made the changes that we see right now?
Yeah, I think a lot has changed, but a lot also hasn't in a lot of ways, because we had DeFi summer at 2021, 22. I think right now there's still a lot of that you're chasing right now, right? I think it is still you can still call it DeFi summer right now, right? A lot of the protocols now that actually offer yield, like Athena, I think a lot of people would use it here as well, right? It's really what this is about. It's about farming. It's about about airdrops. This cycle is very similar in that way, but it has gone to be much more mature as a space overall in terms of how you would observe the market trends going, right? The spectacular fall of FTX, and then sort of like Binance settling with the SEC, has certain implications to how centralized exchanges ought to operate, right? If you are operating in a way that has to do with tying your actual government identity into trading and there's an off ramp that actually gets to sort of that ties back to the banking system, there is no way you can get away with things like KYC, right? So the trend that centralized exchanges will go into regulatory landscape is an absolute trend that will continue to happen, because the domiciles will not let sort of like these exchanges to continue to operate without that kind of thing. Now, at the end of the day, right now, it's still in a migration process, because if you're domiciled in a certain place, you have very strict rules sometimes, and sometimes it's so difficult to even start trading with retail. Whereas institutions is different. It's trading with retail, getting even like in Hong Kong, for instance, getting each token approved, it's like pulling teeth. So you might be based in Hong Kong or Singapore, but you don't serve the local community. You will serve external while you're getting that license there. So it's a transition. It would take time for all the exchanges to get licenses, but that's the trend. Now, DeFi, on the other hand, is a completely different animal, right? DeFi is unregulated. It banks unbanked, right? That is very important, right? Because if you're on an off-ramp in like, in centralized exchanges, you do sort of like, need a bank account. But decentralized finance is really the future, right? Because the innovation is coming from the DeFi space at the end of the day, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of like all the degen stuff is going on there. Of course, there's like, you can do derivatives trading in Saxes as well, but a lot of the innovation is coming from the DeFi space. And of course, that stuff, you can really blow shit up, right? With that stuff right now. So, there's leverage, right? There's automation as well. And at the end of the day, what we see is that space of actually banking the millions into crypto and into digital assets will be DeFi, right? Because, in back even in the days of Axie Infinity that you mentioned, right? The first financial account that many Filipinos, I think if you can do a stat at that time, the onboarding process of how many banks have onboarded customers versus how many DeFi wallets or MetaMask has sort of onboarded customers, the first bank account, the first financial account that they have is the wallet, right? So it tells you a lot about banking the unbanked via a gamified system of I can earn this. And it was also good during COVID, right? So people can't be Uber drivers, they can't earn a living, right? But they can get that, right? Get that earning through playing games, and they would. And is play to earn still a thing? Yes, absolutely, because you do need a base load of players that are actually, that you need to match against, that you need to, that creates the core right now. Right now, these free to play, by the way, in monetization is only like 3%. Only 3%, 3 to 4% of players on free to play games actually pay anything. And the whales is predominantly the ones that are supporting the gaming ecosystem. So that base that you're paying for is exactly the same as the base that is on the free-to-play, minus the whales, right? And there will be whales in the same time in the Web3 space in this equivalent, right? So in going back to this is kind of like the innovation that you see in DeFi absolutely will be what will make an impact, right? In terms of like, onboarding the masses. And you can see emerging markets now, Africa, it was sort of a really, really frontier space. Now you're actually seeing a lot more onboarding. LATAM is becoming an important market. And by the way, one thing that we would notice is that the whole center of gravity of Web3 on the consumer side is shifting towards this part of the world. Asia, right, where we actually understand and appreciate digital asset ownership, and the U.S. is sort of like in a lot of ways just fucking it up, right? Because honestly speaking, why would you go after space in a way that is so there's regulation by enforcement, right? It just doesn't provide the necessary innovation that allows a real whatever that they don't like, and they're throwing basically the baby out with the bathwater, right? So you should allow for things that you actually do like how Hong Kong and the Singapore is doing it, than to throw the whole thing out, right? So, but we do think that the U.S. will come back, and once that the regulation is much more clear, you see the U.S. really roaring back with that innovation and maybe even leading the world as well.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your thought. I think I agree. Like, and I think this is something that was discussed right before our session, like how there could be a parallel world between, the more compliant, regulated, the CFI world, and then the DeFi world that's driving the innovation. I think, yeah, it was right on point on that. Yeah. Yeah, I think we are very much, finished right now. So, yeah, let's thank Evan for sharing us his insights and thoughts on the past, present, and the future of finance and how Asia will play a pivotal role in this world. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
Thank you.